d'inclusion des hommes et des
The
femmes,
democratic order is based on a principle, the principle of including men and women in the same political organization, which has a universal scope. The democratic order is based on the idea that reason is shared by all men and women and based on the values of liberty. Thus, we're talking about a fundamentally emancipatory project for all people, and democracies, as we know them today, are the richest and the most balanced in the world. These are convictions that I share myself. Nevertheless, I'd like to reflect on these convictions and point out that democracy is still a fragile system, a fragile order.
La première menace, c'est de ne pas être assez démocratique.
So we are talking about a fragile system, a fragile order. And briefly, I would like to point it out for you that this fragile order has to face two different kinds of challenges. One of them is not having enough democracy or not being democratic enough, and the other challenge is to have too much democracy, to use a terminology from Montesquieu, to have extreme democracy. These are the two kinds of challenges that the democratic order has to face. The order of citizenship transcends particular loyalties and religious or ethnic creeds, and so democracy needs its citizens to transcend these loyalties and affiliations in a spontaneous manner, even though citizens often belong to different ethnic or religious groups. Nevertheless, citizens are required to transcend these affiliations, and this requirement can sometimes seem artificial, contrasted with the spontaneous and natural identities as parts of religious or ethnic groups.
Se pose moins, c'est-à-dire le problème du rapport.
In France, the questions of the democratic order and the problems that have to do with this transcendence of loyalties, they are less defined by the heritage of ethnic groups, ethnic identities within the historical France, such as Corsica or Alsace or Bretagne. They have to do much more with the waves of migrants that arrived in France after bringing down the former colonies, and also to meet the need for manual labor after the Second World War.
Ça fait partie des imperfections.
It is clear that reality does not coincide with ideas, and democracies have much more, and they can hardly respect their own values sometimes. The countries that I have mentioned use or have some kind of aggressive thinking to these groups of ethnicity that we can resume as racism. It is true that economic conditions have made it more and more difficult to integrate socially these groups. In the European countries, policies have privileged the old over the young, the public over the private sphere, and so working class youth is the first victim of the crisis, and among them, the descendants of migrants are overrepresented. They are very visible, and in democracy, visibility is important. They don't have a regular employment. They are desocialized in the suburbs of big cities. We have to add that the last migration waves, and France has seen these waves since the 19th century, so that the last waves of migration have come from the sub-Saharan Africa, and mostly from territories that have been colonies, that have a tradition of Muslim religion. So their integration is made even more difficult by geopolitical conflicts over the world.
L'affirmation des valeurs communes est
Democracies must integrate members and descendants of migrants in their societies, irrespective of whether they are migrants or not. Democracies are the most tolerant societies towards different particularities. They are most tolerant than all other kinds of societies man has ever known, and still arguing on the basis of liberty and of toleration. We cannot have a kind of toleration or tolerance that would undermine the democratic order itself.
s'est affaibli.
Today we are living the world of the immediate realities. We are not looking at the interests of the future generations anymore. Political activities have become a kind of reaction much more than a long-term kind of thinking. To conclude, I am going to present a final question. I would like you to reflect on this one. There is a democratic utopia that is about the actual world made up of experience. All of us are experiencing this in the most immediate way. So this utopia of hic et nunc, which is now and here, evokes the problem of asking how can a society which lacks every shared transcendence maintain a concept of the world and big values that are organizing social life of democratic individuals. If we don't think about providence anymore, if we don't think about nation or homeland, France or Hungary anymore, so we don't think about things which are going beyond the immediate here and now, how can we state that the collective life imposes some restrictions which are necessary for collective life?